It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Gloria Kaufman Community Center at the Wende Museum for the Voices of Defiance Symposium. Yes, you can clap. In the wake of what's been a very difficult, as you know, last few weeks here in LA, I can't help but feel that stories of resilience, of inspiration are more important than ever. And these stories remind us of the power of the human spirit and what's possible when we all get together and when we can thrive. We can thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. And that's what the spirit is of today. And tomorrow, as we observe Holocaust Remembrance Day, we're reminded once again of the stakes, what we're doing here, why we're here, preserving memory, fighting oppression, standing against injustice. And the symposium like this doesn't just come together. It only happens because of a group effort. It started about a year ago with Sasha Smuckler when we were imagining and dreaming and thinking about what this could be and what it would look like. The Arcadia Fund was supporting our digitization efforts in the space. Michelle Tocci from David Berg Foundation supporting the digitization efforts. Anit Vortman, who so many of you know, even though she's not here, I feel like she's here, has connected so many of us. She has an extraordinary network of people around the world. And Marina Yudborowski, where are you, Marina? Who's been our guide, our guru, and leader for us as we go along this journey of building our Soviet Jewry archive and program. Thank you. A special heartfelt thanks to the Kuhn Family Foundation for helping to underwrite this event and being one of the major patrons of our outreach efforts. They've been amazing, along with the Unstoppable Meyer and Rini Luskin, who are supporting our public history program. They believe in the power of history to guide and inspire us. And David's here with us. It's very much involved with the Luskins, and I've turned to on many occasions to help me think through, strategize this program and others. So we've got a busy year ahead of us, David. And also Zev, I'm going to save some of my intro for Zev Yaroslavsky for after this next section when we invite him up onto the stage. But I'm so glad. I mean, it started with you. You were our first get. And we're like, we built the rest of the symposium around Zev. And I have to say, I led with that. I'm like, hey, we got Zev, guys. Come on board. And so I'm so glad you agreed to be the keynote speaker. Homegrown leadership in Los Angeles, I care about. Our mayor of Culver City is here. Dan O'Brien, raise your hand, Dan. So we got some heavy hitters in here, or mockers, as this group might like to say. And there's someone here that who would have cherished this moment more than anyone. My friend, the late, great, remarkable Ed Robin. May his memory be a blessing. Without Ed, we wouldn't be here today. He was the one who started this program, giving us the framework to envision and create something so meaningful. His leadership, his generosity, his vision inspired all of us to create together and to form with his leadership the Robin Center for Russian-Speaking Jewry. And Ed was someone, as I was saying last night, this was always an important movement to him, important part of his life. And interestingly, it became an important part of my life because of Ed. And we're so fortunate that we're here with Ed's family to carry on his legacy. Peggy Robin, his wonderful wife, is here. Peggy, thank you so much for being here. And they're here also alongside, I saw Jill and Nat and Nurit and of course, Rich, who we're gonna hear from in just a minute. And it's because of their commitment to the Robbins Center that we were able to gather here in the spirit of togetherness, of community and communion, and it's just as Ed would have wanted it. And now the Russian-speaking Jewry Center that Ed envisioned and dreamed of and brought to life is now our landmark program here at the Wende. It's such a remarkable anchor and northern star and light for all of us. You know, it's one of the things that when I imagine the future of the Wende, it is very much about the growth of these projects and programs that really connect us to one another, connecting the here and the there and the then and the now. And all of this is built on the archival preservation initiative, gatherings like this, historical witnesses, and the scholars who will help us think through what this all means and help us to chart a course for the future of this history. So as we seek to expand it, our co-producer of this symposium, Sasha Smuckler, just gave me some great news. He will fund 2 archivists of the Robbins Center for a year to preserve and share this history with the world. Thank you, Sasha. It's an amazing tribute to Ed, the Robbins Center, and I'm so grateful to you. And it's been such a joy and a delight and a privilege to be here together with you. And look, as we fight wildfires and we have issues around the globe, as you all know, we're reminded of the importance of being here together in this room to talk about a movement of togetherness that was successful, that had enormous impact. And gosh, what an example for all of us today. Ed's ideas and dreams live on, and we're here to celebrate them, to uphold them, and to carry them forward. And now, it's my distinct privilege to introduce someone who embodies this legacy so fully, Ed and Peggy's son, Rich Robin. Please come up here to the stage and help us kick off today's symposium. Come on, Rich.
I have to lower this. Good morning. I'm Rich Robin, as Justin mentioned. I'm joined here by my wife, Nurit, my sister and her husband, my sister Jill and her husband, Nat, and my mother, Peggy. When my sister and I were children, there were certain evenings when our parents would give briefings to people in the Jewish community, politicians, and journalists as they prepared to visit the Soviet Union. They would explain to their guests what to say if they were asked questions, whether to bring transistor radios or Judaica or books. Our parents, Ed and Peggy Robin, traveled to the Soviet Union several times on missions to show support to Jewish Refuseniks, those Soviet Jews who were denied the freedom to immigrate, often were imprisoned, and had their academic and professional credentials taken away from them, just for being Jewish or for wanting to live Jewish lives. For us, this almost seemed a routine activity. Our parents both worked, and they took the time to raise us to be responsible adults, or so they thought. And at the same time, they were driven personally by this goal of bringing welfare, and in this case, freedom, to our Jewish family that was suffering. As I reflect, I think they recognized the power and strength of Jewish unity. When we all work together to accomplish something, it is amazing what we can achieve. And when we work together, we demonstrate unimaginable resilience. Today, as Jews, we are going through another period where our resilience is being tested, and we are able to reflect on lessons learned during the Refusenik period. I often wonder what my dad would have done in this time, how he would have been activated, and how he would have activated us. If there are 2 things that are certain, he would have had to say something to say about it, and he would have been right. Working with many of you, my father, Ed Robin, with my mother, Peggy, by his side, took on a distinguished resume of community activity, including an early highlight of organizing the 1987 rally for Soviet Jews in Washington, D.C., which drew some 250,000 supporters. Can't speak about my dad without mentioning that event. My father also always watched out for the rising young star, whether it was in Jewish community work or in business. When he was introduced to Justin Jampol, he knew he found a young, bright star, so was very excited about possibilities, the next phase in his journey to support Soviet Jewry, its history, and its heroism. Ed envisioned a portion of the Wende Museum that would deepen and expand awareness of the history of Russian-speaking Jews, Jews who lived in the Soviet Union, and the Refuseniks movement. Indeed, during the founding of the Robin Center, my father said that, quote, "The Robin Center could not have a better home than the Wende Museum, with its nearly 20-year commitment to acquiring, preserving, and providing access to at-risk materials from the Eastern Bloc. The Wende and its innovative programming guarantees that the history and memory of Soviet Jewry will endure within the vital context of the Cold War period," end quote. Justin, thank you for making this a reality. And thank you to the many foundations, companies, and individuals that have made the Wende possible and such a success. Today's Voices of Defiance Symposium represents a milestone for the Robin family and for the Wende Museum. I'm proud of my parents' leadership in this important subject, and am grateful that Justin and so many others did the hard work in bringing it to fruition. And I hope all of you enjoy the symposium and learn from it. Thank you.
What a great way to start what's going to be, I hope, the beginning of a multi-year, long into the future commitment to gathering together like this, because I'm a big believer, and I mean, we're sitting here in the Kauffman Community Center. I believe in community. I believe in people being together in the space, exchanging ideas, getting to know each other. And I think one of the most heartfelt things was being upstairs last night, where so many of us were who came to be here. Shana Penn, who was another person that helped me to think through this space, because we all need guides and friends in this space to connect with the right people, to get to know them. And it was so heartfelt to see people from all over the world who were involved in different parts and aspects of the movement, scholarship, foundation, philanthropy coming together, some of whom have not seen each other for decades. I also have to say it's a bit personal for me. And I've heard this story from others as well, so I know it's not a unique one, but my grandparents were involved in the Federation here in LA and went to the USSR in the late 70s, early 80s. And I remember hearing stories about it, but not, I obviously couldn't quite get my head around it. And then I remember having this long discussion with them when the day the Berlin Wall fell and what the significance was. And for them, this meant a whole new period, a whole new era. And I was 11 at the time, but I kept the LA Times from that day, which I found then years later. And I thought how interesting life can be, such a full circle moment. The other full circle moment is that I've heard so much about Zev from my grandparents. He's a fixture in LA. He was a big deal in the movement and continues to be a guide and a beacon for us in LA. He was a galvanizing force for what became our Free Soviet Jewry movement here in LA. And then he went further than that, because he was on the LA City Council and the LA County Board of Supervisors. So he was in the highest positions of leadership in LA. And to have that representation for somebody that's experienced this, who's gone through this, is so, he's an ambassador for us and continues to be. So as I said, Zeb, we started with you in the symposium, and I'm so glad you agreed to be the keynote speaker here. You continue to be a galvanizing force for all of us. And as an Angelino, I'm so proud that you're one of ours. Come up here, Zeb.
Thank you, Justin. This is being live streamed, right? So for all the people all over the world who are watching this, this is an important day for us. This is the first rain we've had since May. And so it takes a little getting used to. Justin, thank you very much for that generous introduction. And I want to just congratulate you on the work and the Robbins family and everyone who's involved with the Wende. I thought this was a pipe dream when you first came to me years ago, and what you've done is just incredible, and I'm honored to be here. I have to confess that when you called me in July about this, giving this talk, I didn't realize that the NFL semifinal games would. So I'm recording them. What can I? And our teams are not in the running anymore. For those of you who were here last night and watched the movie Refuseniks, that's really a synopsis of the talk I would give, because so many of the key moments in my life that got me involved in this and the reasons for my getting involved in this were mentioned, were a thread throughout the film. And for those of you who haven't seen the great film that Laura Bialis, who is here, put together some, 18 years ago now, it is the definitive documentary film about the Refuseniks movement and the activist movement that supported them. And I think you can get it online, Amazon or Prime. I've actually watched it in the past online. So it's a great primer on this whole issue. I want to tell you how I got involved in this. And I don't want to make this about me. I was a young student when I got involved in this. I was too stupid or too naive to think that you don't take on the world's other superpower and win. It never occurred to me that we wouldn't win. Although when we did win, it was a shock. I think Michael Sherborne in the Refuseniks movie says he never, I'm paraphrasing, he couldn't believe that he would live long enough to see the wall come down and everything just turn around 180 degrees. But we always felt we were righteous and we would win. And that's the power of youth, young people who have idealism and aren't corrupted by experience. and you know, and to tell you why we can't get things done, they believe youth can tell you that they can do almost anything. My first exposure to Jews behind the Iron Curtain was at my bar mitzvah in 1961. My dad had two sisters in Kharkiv now, in Ukraine, and whom I later visited. But we got a telegram from his aunts and my only first cousin there, and it said in Russian, but translated in English, congratulations on your 13th birthday. And we got dozens of telegrams for my bar mitzvah, which is Mazel Tov on your bar mitzvah, you know, Mazel Tov, bar mitzvah, you know, back and forth. I said, what's with happy birthday? I asked my father. And he said, well, if they had said bar mitzvah in the telegram, it probably wouldn't have been sent through to us. Number two, they might have had a visit from the KGB and no telling what happened. So the safe thing to do was just happy birthday. And that was the first exposure I had in a kind of visceral way, like, what kind of a country is this that doesn't let you say Mazel Tov on your bar mitzvah? Then I went to the Soviet Union on my first trip of many in 1968, I was a sophomore at UCLA, and it was not a Soviet Jewry trip. It was a trip that I was taking in part with my father to visit my aunts in Kharkov. And of course, I stopped in Moscow on the way. Didn't go to Leningrad at that time, but I spent, as I like to say, I spent a lifetime in Kharkov 1 week. And my aunt met me, my older aunt met me in Moscow, the airport. And I recognized her right away. She looked just like my dad. And she was my tour guide around Moscow. And she takes me to the Lenin Mausoleum in Red Square. And in the middle of Red Square, I decided this would be a safe place to broach the subject of Soviet anti-Semitism. And I said, what what's it like for Jews in the Soviet Union or something along those lines? And she said, the walls have ears. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that phrase, not the last time, but, and I'm looking around, Red Square is a pretty big square. The nearest wall is 100 yards away. What is this about the walls have ears? But it had a profound impact on me. And when we ended up in Kharkov, where we did spend a week, and my dad joined us, we had a Shabbat dinner at my aunt's apartment, two-room apartment, and with a communal bathroom on the fourth floor. And it's another thing I won't forget. And my uncle, my aunt's husband, wasn't there yet when we started dinner. When we sat down for dinner, and I said, "Where's Miron?" And he says, "He's at a meeting." And then he shows up, and we have dinner, said the kiddush and the hamotzi and everything. We have an incredible dinner, which probably cost them 2 months worth of their income. And then we take the trolley train back to the hotel, and my father said, "You know that when Rosa said that he was at a meeting, you know where he was?" I said, "I have no idea." He said he was at a minyan. He goes to a minyan every Friday night and Saturday morning because there's no synagogue in Kharkov, a city that had somewhere between 80 and 100,000 Jews. As I said in the book, my memoir is that there are about that many Jews between La Brea and La Cienega in Los Angeles. And there are dozens and dozens of synagogues and shtibels, not one you have to go to a minyan in somebody's apartment. And so that trip had a profound impact on me. And when I got home, I decided I was going to form an organization of students, organization which basically was made up of my friends and my fellow students. And we started to organize protests, which we were counseled very strongly by the Jewish establishment. And I know there are people from the Jewish establishment here, and I'm not, I've buried the hatchet with them a long, long time ago. But this was the split in the Jewish community. The young people wanted to do stuff. As Yossi Klein Halevi says in the movie, one of the great lines of all time, he says that this gave us the chance to retroactively fight the Holocaust. And that's exactly the way a lot of us felt. And I certainly felt that way too, not to sit by and remain silent while this persecution, this cultural genocide is taking place back in the old country. And so we organized, the first demonstration we organized was when the Soviet track team came here in 1969 in a US-USSR dual track meet. And I got 20 of my friends, made up some picket signs. We called the press, and the press showed up in droves. There were more press than there were demonstrators. And I have in my possession a letter from the guy who ran the Jewish Federation's Soviet Jewry Commission, urging me not to do it. It would be counterproductive. That was a word that became kind of a bad word for us, counterproductive. Everything we did was counterproductive. Jews might go and get arrested, might go to Siberia because you protested with a picket line in front of the dormitories at USC where the Soviet track team was staying. I said, I think very highly of myself, but I just doubt that the KGB is following everything I do. And if I have a picket line, that they're going to round up Jews and send them to Siberia. And by the way, this is not what Jews in the Soviet Union were telling me on my last trip and on my second trip, which I took in 1969. So the rest, as they say, is history. And we pushed and pushed, and it wasn't just us. I mean, I was, and I want to pay homage to a few people in the history of this movement. Glenn Richter and Jacob Birnbaum, who were in the film last night. You saw them. Dr. Lou Rosenblum, whose daughter is here. Where are you, Miriam? Right here. Lou Rosenblum was one of my mentors in this movement. One of the great people I've ever known. A NASA space scientist who would have been just perfectly happy could have been perfectly happy to just have a nice upper middle class scientist's life, but instead devoted his life early on, going back to the early 60s. The first Soviet Jewry button I saw was a button many of you will remember with a shofar on it. It said, "Let my people go," or "I'm my brother's keeper." What was it? I am my brother's keeper. And it said CCSA in small letters, Cleveland Council on Soviet Anti-Semitism. It's one of the first grassroots organizations ever, maybe the first in the country. And he was a mentor to me. And of course, the great and the one and only Cy Frumkin here in Los Angeles, who you got a taste of what he was in that movie last night. He and I were just a team here, and he might have been 20 years older than me, but his mentality was as young as could be, and pushed us to do some really crazy things that ended up putting 10,000 people on the streets of LA for a march on the first night of Hanukkah. First one we did was 5,000. The second one was 10,000, and we really were thinking we were doing and I think we were doing some great things, and we made sure that word got back to the activists, the Refuseniks back in the USSR. And then we kind of graduated into a different realm. Protest is great, and it certainly gives us something to do. We used to, the LA Times used to have a section in the business section about all the ships that were docking at the LA Harbor and Long Beach Harbor on that morning. And about once a week, there was a Russian freighter that would come into town. And we decided we would greet one of the Soviet freighters, and we got two of my buddies. The three of us went in a dinghy all the way out to the Pskov. That was the name of the ship, Pskov, and we spray painted on the side of the ship, "Let the Jews go," and it was a hairy experience because there was this Russian longshoreman looking at us over the edge. I thought he was going to throw a crate down on our heads. And we took a picture of it, got it to the LA Times. That picture ran all over the world on the Associated Press wire. Those are the kinds of things that we did, kind of guerrilla warfare. We met every Russian that we knew was coming here, every Soviet official who we knew was coming here, whether it's a general or a ship. We once were invited onto a ship by the captain of the ship, the so-called captain of the ship. His name was Goldberg. And Cy and I, we had a demonstration. Judea Pearl, who is a professor emeritus, I think now at UCLA, and his son Danny Pearl, who was murdered in Pakistan. Danny and Yehuda were there at this demonstration. The Soviet guy came down. He says, "The captain would like to invite you onto the ship for a sip of vodka." And Cy and I said, "What? Should we go or should we not go?" "Let's go." And so we go. I don't drink vodka, but Cy does. And we had a great talk with this guy. Looked like Myron Cohen out of Hollywood casting. He was just a perfect Jewish uncle. And he was a captain like I was going to run a 4-minute mile. It was a good propaganda thing. They ran a big newspaper story on it, and they asked us, "Well, what do you think? What did you tell the captain?" I said, "Well, we told the captain it's just too bad that not everybody can get on a ship and come to Los Angeles the way he is." And those were the kinds of things we did. But in 1972, there was the Soviet Union and the Nixon administration were trying to get favorable trade and export-import credits. And the Ex-Im Bank, the Export-Import Bank, was negotiating with something. This was before the Jackson-Vanik bill. Cy and I went to a congressman here who was on the committee. I think it was the Ways and Means Committee. Tom Reese, who used to represent the area where I lived then and now. And we asked him if he would bring in a bill that would condition these credits that the Soviets were looking for on free immigration, some version of free immigration. Tom was a good politician, patted us on the head, said, "Great, let's look into it." He drafted a bill. The bill went nowhere. But what happened was it raised the prospect of using trade and economic incentives to the Soviet Union to condition them on freedom of immigration. The Jackson-Vanik bill was introduced, I think, the first time in late 1972. And we became nationally, all of the groups, and I should mention this, all of the groups in the independent groups, the grassroots groups around the country, about 6 of us got together and formed an organization called the Union of Councils for Soviet Jews. And it was not well received by the Jewish establishment, but nothing we seem to do met with their satisfaction. And the Union of Councils began to push very hard on the Jackson-Vanik bill, which eventually everybody in the Jewish community, from the Israeli government to the National Conference on Soviet Jewry to the Union of Councils, everybody got behind Jackson, the Jackson-Vanik bill. And that was a very significant victory, not just for Soviet Jews, but for human rights. And it was, I think, there are historians in this room who are more experienced than I am, but I do believe that on a human rights front, I don't think there's, certainly not in the last 150 years, been a piece of legislation that was as consequential and as significant as the Jackson-Vanik bill, which conditioned most favored nation status, which the Soviets and Richard Nixon wanted very badly. Nixon, because of his contributors, one of them being Pepsi Cola. I've never drank Pepsi Cola ever since. And a lot of Mack trucks and all kinds of people. And we were up against quite an army of opposition. But Scoop Jackson was a very powerful and very principled U.S. senator. And he virtually single-handedly, I'm sure he would not agree that it was single-handed, but he was the muscle that got this thing through. And eventually it was approved by the Congress in late 1974 after Nixon had resigned. And Gerald Ford was forced to sign this omnibus bill, which included the Jackson Amendment. It was an amendment to a trade bill, and he signed it. And as a result, I believe over the next several years, tens and tens of thousands of Jews were allowed to leave. Nobody will ever know, was it because of this or was it not because of this or despite of this? When you have leverage, you use it. I forget who the, I think it was Lyndon Johnson who said when he became president, he said, I have power now and I mean to use it. Having power and not using it for good causes is a waste of your power. And Jackson knew he had leverage and he used it for a good cause. All of these things, I mean, there are so many things that we did as a community at large. And one of the most gratifying things is that by the time we ended up at the end of in the mid-1970s, late 1970s, there was a coalition of people on all sides of the Jewish spectrum, political and activist spectrum, all pushing in the same direction. It's what are the lessons to be learned from this? The lessons to be learned, in my opinion, are don't ignore what young people have to say. They are the alpha dog. They will push you in a direction that is that more experienced and more seasoned people might not see in their through their glasses. And B, we used to have an old saying: spew propaganda all you want, but don't believe your own propaganda. So you need to know what's real and what isn't real. We did all of this, by the way. Everybody in this room who was an activist in the Soviet Jewry movement knows we did this without emails, without internet. Can you imagine what it would have been like if we had emails? Communicating, waiting 3 weeks to see whether your letter arrived. It would have been quite a different ballgame. But anything is possible. Anything is possible if you believe you can do it. And I tell my students, and I tell anybody who will listen, is that Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player, didn't make 100% of the shots he didn't take. So take your shots. The worst that can happen is the same thing that would happen if you didn't take your shot. The best that can happen is you might succeed. And that was the lesson the lessons that we learned. I want to mention the history of this movement is really important. And this symposium is in that realm, in that context, is also very important. The archives that you're putting together, the archives Miriam and Sasha Smokler and a group of us are involved with the Soviet Jewry Movement Archives Project, which is, we're going to be working with you on this as well, Justin, is to amass all of the documentation of this movement, of all the things that were done, the little things and the big things, into a virtual archive that anybody researchers or just anybody who's interested will be able to access. This is a very important thing, that this movement's history is preserved, not just because it's history, but because it's a history lesson that can inform how we proceed on similar issues, or on any issues for that matter, going forward in the future. There are a lot of lessons to be learned. I want to just conclude with one thought. When Laura premiered her movie in Jerusalem, I think it was 2007, right? January, February, December. I did a crazy thing. I flew to Israel for one day. My sister lives in Israel, so I made it 2 days. And she came down to Jerusalem, and we watched the film, and everybody who was anybody in the Soviet Jewry Refusenik roster who was still alive, and most of them were there. From Slepak to Lerner to Valery Panov, to everybody who was, it was just a reunion of the Refuseniks, some of whom we had met when Lou Rosenblum and Cy Frumkin and Bob Wolf, who was our colleague in Miami and South Florida, and myself went to the Soviet Union in May of 1974 and met with kind of every Refusenik in town in Sasha Luntz's apartment, a moment that is chronicled in Laura's Refusnik movie. They were all there in Jerusalem, and it was, and I said at that time, when Laura asked me to say a few words, we always get thanked by Russian Jews, Soviet Jews, Jews from the former Soviet Union. Thank you for what you did. Thank you for what you did. I have to thank you. All of us who were in the Soviet Jewry movement got more out of this than you got out of our work. Because number one, and I'll speak for myself, it gave me renewed purpose in life. It was a transformative thing to fight the KGB, to fight on behalf of Jews who wanted just to be Jews. That's all. They didn't ask for anything more. And the heroics of these folks, these were people who had a lot to lose, even in the Soviet system. They were engineers, they were professors, they were scientists. They had a lot to lose by opening their mouths, by filing an application to leave, losing their jobs, being arrested, going to Siberia, going into exile for 7 or 8 years. These were incredible heroes to us. I mean, we gave up a football game to go do a protest rally at the Soviet track team. They risked their lives and their livelihoods. And so to the Soviet Refuseniks and the people who were in this movement, both there and here, you did more for us than we did for you. It gave us purpose. For young people like me, it clarified what was important in life. And the Soviet Jewry movement, even for me as a public servant at the local level, the walls have ears, right? When the LAPD was exposed, having a division within the police department that spied on people who had political views that differed from the police chiefs, people advised me, don't take on the LAPD. They're very powerful, and they were very powerful, and they can hurt you politically, which they could. But I said, after you've played hide and seek with the KGB, the LAPD is a walk in the park, and I'm not going to remain silent on something like this, because the walls in my office have ears too. And so this had a profound impact on every single person to this day. People who marched with us remember it as profoundly as anything else in their life. And so I thank you, all of you who were in the USSR at the time, for giving us that opportunity to reclaim our Jewishness and on our morality when it comes to fighting for human rights, because that's at the end of the day what this was about. It wasn't just about Jews, it was about human beings and human rights. So thank you very much, Justin. I want to mention Dodi Fromson, who is the wife of the late CBS Moscow correspondent Murray Fromson, who's they're both great friends of ours. informed me this morning, and it was in the paper, that Evelyn Dreyfus, who was one of the Soviet Jewry activists here in LA, passed away this past week, and I wanted to mention that. And I welcome all of you to this rainy day that we've been waiting for since May. Thank you all very much.
Zev, don't go far. Don't go far. So we have a small gesture of our enormous appreciation for you and what you've done. And this is something that you're usually on the other side of this. Today, you're on the receiving side of this. Culver City we're the only museum in the city of Culver City. And we are delighted and thrilled to be here. And I often will say to people, it would be hard to imagine this place in any other place, because I can call up the mayor of Culver City and say, Dan, we're having a symposium. And he goes, great, when does it start? So he will come. He lives 2 blocks away. And while his name is O'Brien, he is an honorary member of the tribe, even more so after today. So I would like to welcome up Mayor Dan O'Brien. Is going to do a short presentation.
Zev, I think it's appropriate that you're up here with me. Thank you. I just met Zev, and it's funny, and bear with me because I never write speeches down. I do what I think Zev has done his whole life, and that's listen, kind of feel the room and learn while you're here. And the thing that I really appreciate, I only knew Zev as a county supervisor, this figure from far away. And when Justin asked me to participate today and present the certificate of recognition, I did research. And I think it's really critical that you learn about what you are going to talk about. You just don't come up and read the certificate, which I will do. But I was, profoundly, internally transformed by what I learned about what you've done. And the words that came out of your mouth just a few minutes ago, I appreciate, because it's the things I value in advocates. I don't like the term for people like you and I, politicians. I consider us advocates. We do get involved in politics, but your humility up here, always acknowledging those that do the work. You are the advocate, you are the loudspeaker, but you started as just a humble student who asked questions of your aunt, listened, learned, listened some more, and we're part of a movement that was significant. And while you humbly pushed the credit to others, which you should, you were definitely important in that movement, and it may not have been as successful as it was without you. So I always have to look back into myself in this position and tell myself that I don't know everything, and really be sure to listen. The Jewish history is very, or at least was foreign to me. I've learned as a resident of Los Angeles now for 35 plus years. I was raised in Idaho, where I didn't know a single Jewish person growing up. I really didn't know what it was, honestly. And then came down to USC. Sorry, Zev. It's funny you said the sacrifice. He only had to sacrifice a football game. Tomorrow night is a USC-UCLA basketball game, and we have a city council meeting. True sacrifice. But I'm inspired by your history, and it's really important that we don't let go. We don't need to linger on history, but it's important to know it and to learn from it, and we all will learn from you. I'm going to read what the city wrote for you. In recognition of achievement, the City Council of the City of Culver City hereby awards a certificate of recognition to Zev Yaroslavsky. On behalf of the City Council of the City of Culver City, you're recognized for your extraordinary dedication to justice, human rights, in the enduring fight for freedom. The city of Culver City honors your pivotal role in championing the Free Soviet Jewry movement. As a keynote speaker at the Wende Museum's International Symposium, Voices of Defiance, we celebrate your unwavering commitment to giving voice to the silenced and inspiring generations to stand up for what is right. So, thank you, Jewry.